The U.S. reimposed sanctions against Iran on Tuesday after U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in May. But despite the sanctions and threats in caps, Trump says he's open to talking with the Iranian president any time. Is this a PR stunt or genuine overture? And after 3 years of construction, fresh water from the Chinese mainland was finally delivered to a small island of Taiwan. While the locals celebrated, the Taiwan administration was not happy. Why? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran, which have already been simmering, are on the brink of boiling over. The U.S. reimposed its first round of sanctions against Tehran on Tuesday, targeting trade in automobiles, metals and coal. Even harsher sanctions against Iran's banking and energy sectors, including restrictions on its vital oil industry, are slated to take effect in November. The sanctions were removed under the Obama administration in 2015 as part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action reached among Iran, the U.S., China, France, the U.K., Russia and Germany. But U.S. President Donald Trump abandoned the plan last May, much to the chagrin of the other countries involved and the rest of the international community. Trump added, anyone doing business with Iran will not be doing business with the United States. But despite Trump's toxic moves and rants, the U.S. president says he's open to talking with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani anytime they want and without preconditions. So fake bait or the real deal? What's behind Trump's offer? If a summit does take place, how will U.S. allies in the region react? And what new dangers will emerge as a consequence of reimposed U.S. sanctions on Iran? Joining me from Tehran is Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran and Tom West, Associate Vice President of the Cohen Group in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let's first look at the contradiction messages that President Trump has been sending out. I mean, last month, July the 23rd to be specific, he posted one of his most notorious tweets, which reads to Iranian President Rouhani, never threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. But then, shortly later, a week later, he committed a serious about-face, saying at a White House press conference that he would meet with Iran if they wanted to meet. I don't know if they're ready yet. No preconditions, he added in his tweet just last Saturday. I will meet or not meet. It doesn't matter. It's up to them. So let me go to Mr. West. How should we interpret President Trump's apparent about-face? Is this a PR stunt or a real overture?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Well, first I would say, I view the prospects of a meeting between President Trump and President Rouhani as very slim, and for two main reasons. The first is that I think from Iran's perspective, and I'd be interested to hear from Professor Marandi, but they view U.S. credibility on these sorts of issues as very, very slim. The United States withdrew from an agreement negotiated with the P5+1. And now has, frankly, the moral high ground in standing on the side, continuing to adhere to the agreement. And I see very little incentive for Iran to come to the table because the United States has put the bar so very, very high. What they view as a reason to come to the table today would be a change in Iran's behavior across the region, and I do not see that occurring. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I think the other reason is that President Rouhani is politically isolated now. The United States withdrawal from the JCPOA strengthened the hand of hardliners, of the Iranian Quds Force, of the Supreme Leader, and he cannot be seen as weak, and I think you saw that in his reaction to President Trump's offer shortly after it was delivered. He essentially said, under no circumstances will I meet this person.
Right. Well, let's take a look at Iranian President Rouhani's response. He said, I don't have preconditions if the U.S. government is willing. Let's start right now. However, he then indicated that Iran would want the U.S. to scale back sanctions before any talks could begin, saying, if somebody puts a knife in its opponent or enemy's arm and says we want to negotiate, the answer is that they must first pull out the knife and then come to the negotiation table. So, Professor Marandi, what do you think Iran is really saying by this?
I think President Rouhani is being quite clear that unless the United States goes back to reinforcing the JCPOA, there's really nothing to talk about. And the irony is that the United States and Iran were talking under Obama, the U.S. Secretary of State, and the Iranian Foreign Minister had very extensive one-on-one negotiations and extensive negotiations within the framework of the P5+1. And even under Trump, Rex Tillerson, who was previously the Secretary of State, also had negotiations with the Iranian Foreign Minister. So it was Trump who ended this process by exiting the JCPOA. And for President Rouhani, there are two basic reasons why I think he simply will not negotiate with Trump under these circumstances. One is that the United States, Trump has torn up an international agreement which the United States is committed to, and he has no credibility. And also the Iranians believe that if they negotiate with him hypothetically, who's to say that he's not going to tear up a future agreement? And if the Iranians do agree to negotiate, then Trump will probably see this as a sign of weakness, and this will be appeasement, and he will become more aggressive. Yes. So there's simply no way for the Iranians to negotiate with this person. He's unpredictable. Okay. One day he says one thing, the next day he says the next. So it's just a dead end right now.
Well, at this moment also we're hearing from the U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo talking about the preconditions that this kind of summit can happen. Basically said if Iran would behave like a normal country, that's the ask. It's pretty simple. So he again is contradicting his president. Okay, let's not talk about this kind of the prospect of a summit. Rather, let's talk about the sanctions which have been snapped back, and they are actually called snapback sanctions. And as I said, the first round of sanctions just went into effect on Tuesday, and the second part is expected to take effect in November. So, Professor Marandi, what kind of economic damage is this round of sanctions having on the Iranian economy at this moment?
Well, the current sanctions really don't have that much of an effect. It's the November sanctions that are much more important. And the current sanctions already had their effect over the past few weeks. And one of the perhaps positive things that the administration did, the Rouhani administration did, although in my opinion a bit quite late, is that they've begun to set up a new series of policies to deal with the current situation. And over the past 3 or 4 days, we've seen relative stability in the markets. But after 3 months from when the United States is demanding countries to discontinue the oil trade with Iran, that's when the challenge becomes greater. Some countries have already indicated that they will not abide by U.S. demands, and it's obviously not in the interest of many countries to allow the United States to get away with this, because if the United States is able to win an economic war against a country, then other countries know that the United States or Trump will be thinking about using the same weapon against other countries. So it's in the interest of countries like China, Russia, and others to make sure that Trump fails. But in addition to that, the Iranians are envisaging selling oil to private companies, smaller companies across the world, probably at a discounted price, in order to preserve their output. So we'll have to see what happens. At the moment, Iran's production is pretty much normal, but we'll have to see what happens in November.
Well, Iran said that its Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps held a naval exercise in the Strait of Hormuz last week within the framework of their annual training program. U.S. officials said these exercises meant that that Iran is trying to show that it has the ability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. So, Professor Rouhani, what kind of possibility there is for Iran to do that, and if that really becomes a reality, what kind of implications would it have for oil trade in that region?
Well, at this stage, I think that what President Rouhani is trying to say is that he is not going to be intimidated by Trump. I don't think that the Iranians have any interest whatsoever, or they're planning at all to close down the Strait of Hormuz. However, if the United States really does try to prevent Iran from exporting its oil, and if a country like Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates are seen by Iranians as engaging in this warfare with Iran, then policy could change towards these two countries. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iran began a stop-and-search policy on some ships. Iran's navy and its presence in the Persian Gulf today is much greater than before. And so if they feel that the Saudis and the Emiratis are somehow trying to destroy the Iranian economy or help Trump bring serious damage to the country, then that policy could change. But I don't see any indication that Iran is moving towards closing the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, the Iranians have been the key to protecting the Strait of Hormuz over the last few decades.
Mr. West, now on Monday, Rouhani said on Monday that last month I was in Europe, conducted talks with China, and their promise they will ignore the American sanctions, and China is our biggest trading partner. China and Russia stated clearly they will stand with the framework of their agreement. So what does this reimposed sanctions mean to trade relations between China and Iran? Let's remember that China is also locked in a fierce trade friction with the United States, and I just said at the earlier program that that Trump has said whoever is doing business with with Iran is not doing business with the United States. So how is that relationship working out between China and Iran, two of very important trading partners?
Well, you know, I think first it's important to recognize that today EU foreign ministers issued a blocking statute that aims to protect their own companies' investments in Iran. And really, at the outset of this announcement to withdraw from the agreement, you saw a number of European companies making proactive decisions to make clear that they would comply with U.S. sanctions. And they include Peugeot, Siemens, Total, and others. Now, insofar as China-Iran relations are concerned, I think Chinese decision makers will have a difficult choice on their hands. You know, China, South Korea, Japan, Turkey, and India are the top importers of Iranian crude. And as you rightly flagged, I think November will be a very important date coming ahead. I think you've seen a number of those countries make very clear that they intend to comply with U.S. sanctions. It's generally thought that China has a greater latitude on these questions, but can certainly face a strong enforcement regime from the United States.
Professor Marandi, what do you say to the news that actually the petrol yuan, which means renminbi-backed oil contracts, have actually benefited from the sanctions that the U.S. imposed? Is President Trump doing China a favor by imposing these sanctions on Iran?
Yes, he's doing China a great favor because I think that the Iranians are going to be increasingly moving in that direction. And that actually will be one way in which the Iranians will be able to preserve their exports. The Shanghai oil market will be one way in which the Iranians can sell their oil. And since Iran-Chinese relations have improved so dramatically over the past decade, the Iranians feel that most of their needs can be provided by the Chinese market. So if the yuan is used, China benefits immensely because almost all of Iran's oil exports, the money that comes to Iran will return back to China. So for every extra barrel of oil that the Chinese import from Iran, the Chinese benefit completely from that oil because Iran will be inclined to spend the yuan in China.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran and Tom West, Associate Vice President of the Cohen Group in Washington, D.C. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, a small island of Taiwan's thirst for fresh water has been quenched. But why is the Taiwan government trying to rain on the parade? Stay with us. The days of chronic water shortages in the Kinmen, a small island of Taiwan, are gone. A pipeline started delivering fresh water from the province of Fujian on the Chinese mainland to Kinmen on Sunday morning. A ceremony was held at the island's Tianbu Reservoir, where water from Fujian is stored, to mark the arrival of the new water supply. More than 3,000 locals showed up for the festivities. The 28-kilometer pipeline will provide 34,000 cubic meters of water daily to Kinmen. Liu Jie, head of the Taiwan Affairs Office of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, said the smooth operation of the water supply project concerning Kinmen people's welfare is a great event in the history of Kinmen's development, as well as the cross-Strait relations. However, the Taiwan administration led by Tsai Ing-wen wanted to downplay the event by asking the local government to postpone the ceremony in consideration of the so-called big picture. What's the consideration, and why has fresh water been politicized? Joining me for the discussion in the Beijing studio is Dr. Zhong Houtao, Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and from Taipei we have Joanna Lei, a former Taiwan legislator. First of all, let me go to Joanna in Taipei. Joanna, please tell us how serious the water shortage problem has been in Kinmen before the project was finished, how long it took, and how the local residents as well as the local economy been affected by the water shortage in the past.
Well, certainly this is a project that has been in the working for over 20 years. It was first proposed in 1996 during a very severe drought. People thought of piping water from mainland China to support this island, which is really far away from Taiwan and extremely close to Xiamen. During the past 20 years, different regime has negotiated, but there were nothing inked until 2015, during Ma Ying-jeou's last year. I think it is important to realize that water is not only important lifeline for the people living on the island, which counts to about 129,000 at this point, but it is also very critical for its economic pipeline, namely the Kinmen Gaoliang Liquor Company, which I was a chairperson during 2008. Produces the largest amount of fiscal contribution to the local government, as well as deliver local well-being to the people, and that is a heavy water consumption industry. So it is not only for the daily use of the people on the island, but also to support its key industry. It's critical to have steady, clean water supply for Kinmen. So this is a very welcome news for everybody there.
Dr. Zhong, explain to us in greater details, if a water shortage had been such a problem in the history of Kinmen for so long, why nothing was done until 2013, when the former Kuomintang administration was in power, that a deal was inked between Taiwan and the mainland side to do this project so that finally the water shortage can be addressed?
Just as Joanna once said, it is actually a long-term problem in Kinmen for the water shortage, but unfortunately the Taiwan authority did not try to solve this problem. Actually, the Chinese mainland tried to do whatever it could do to help those Kinmen people. Even as early as in 1995, the Fujian province initiated a proposal to provide water supply for Kinmen people. Unfortunately, at that time, the Li Denghui administration refused that proposal, and the following term, that means in Chen Shui-bian administration, the Chen Shui-bian also followed Li Denghui's idea. Only in Ma Ying-jeou administration that only in 2015 the two sides signed agreement on the water supply to Kinmen. So from this you could find that the Taiwan authority, especially in Chen Shui-bian, in the Denghui, and even in Tsai Ing-wen authority, they tried to block the cross-strait communication and cooperation. They were blocked by their Taiwan independence ideology.
So indeed, this was not a problem that was technically impossible or huge in cost or investment. It was a politicized problem, Joanna. Explain to us, including to the many viewers who are not familiar with the different positions on the one China policy or not of all of these previous administrations. What is the key to the success of this water project? What has made it possible, and what is angering the current administration that's led by Taiwan?
I think it's very important to recognize that Kinmen has been spearheading a lot of breakthrough across the Taiwan Straits. The first Red Cross agreement that allow us to jointly deal with issues related to crime and other issues were signed in Kinmen. The first direct link, the ferry boat crossing Xiamen and Kinmen, started in Kinmen as well. So in many, many ways, Taiwan and the DPP government viewed Kinmen as a renegade small island from Taiwan, the island, because Kinmen has a very long association with mainland China. In fact, Kinmen's association with China started from Tang Dynasty, which is much earlier than the rest of Taiwan. It is also said that Zhu Xi has actually resided in Kinmen and taught schools there. So people in Kinmen has a very strong geographical, cultural, historical affiliation with mainland China, and therefore politically it was viewed by the DPP government as a dissident. DPP government tried, during the time I was there too, try not to allow Kinmen to build stronger, closer relationship with mainland China. In fact, Chen Fuhai, the current county magistrate, used the water ceremony to say Kinmen wished to have 3 direct links with electricity, with the bridge built to mainland China, in addition to water. So all of this will be viewed as dissident by the DPP government.
Well, Dr. Zhong, these projects actually benefit the local people, right?
Yes.
If we talk about the water shortage. So what's wrong with letting the people take the benefit of closer exchanges between the two sides? Why is the politics so much in the way?
Those politicians are just worrying that the Kinmen would become much over-relying on Chinese mainland. They just worry that the Kinmen could enjoy a better communication with Xiamen and the entire Fujian province, and they could become much more prone to support reunification with the Chinese mainland. So in this case, that is totally in disagreement with Taiwan authority. That is the reason why Taiwan authority tried to block the initial ceremony. That, yes.
Yeah, we were actually looking at the picture of a ceremony of the arrival of fresh water. Joanna, whether or not to postpone the ceremony was a big contentious point for the administration, right? In the beginning, they would say, we don't want this project to start. And then if they cannot stop this project, they say, OK, we don't want this ceremony to be held. You can have the water, but not the ceremony. What's the logic behind the Taiwan administration in having this kind of considerations?
Well, clearly Taiwan is trying to play tit for tat. If mainland China doesn't allow Taichung to host a Olympic-like game, then Taiwan will retaliate. However, all the things Taiwan proposed to retaliate, quote unquote, actually hurt people in Taiwan rather than hurting people in mainland China. But they're trying to present a view that Taiwan is trying very hard to balance the power between the two regimes and trying to see or trying to persuade people that Taiwan government actually knows what to do. Kinmen is very dangerous for the DPP government because it has all the right ingredients to be independent from Taiwan and build a strong relationship with mainland China. And once that is built, it can be viewed as a domino effect from the point of view of DPP, because Kinmen is physically independent, it has annual physical surplus and a huge reserve. So it doesn't need Taiwan's government to give Kinmen money. KKL, the Kinmen Gaoliang liquor, produce enough surplus to support the economy. And geographically, culturally, and even historical identity, Kinmen people are very, very close to Fujian.
Right. Well,
different from the rest of DPP's controlled Taiwan.
Yeah, well, what I also read about was that Taiwan government or administration does not want any thank you to be said from the people of Kinmen to their counterparts on the mainland. Anyway, the ceremony was held, and it's also interesting to consider the position on the people on the Chinese mainland when cross-Strait relations are experiencing a very low point. The authority on the mainland did not say we are not going to give you the fresh water at this moment if you're not treating us well, and actually they are going ahead and they're paying in part this construction, right, and they're also providing the water at a very subsidized price, which is very, very low compared to transporting water from other parts of Taiwan. So, Dr. Zhong, what is the consideration of the Chinese mainland here? Are they, as what some people in Taiwan are accusing, trying to buy over the people in Kinmen?
As for Chinese mainland, we believe that the two sides belong to one family, belong to one China. As Taiwan people are our compatriots, of course, we would provide our benefits. We provide new opportunities for those Taiwan people. Just for this water supply, as an example, the price for the water for Kinmen is only for about 2.2 yuan in renminbi, which is only a little bit higher than the water supply for the Fujian province people. So from this case, you could find that we are doing whatever we could do to help Kinmen people. We are not trying to make any profit from this project. Actually, we are providing some allowance or even subsidy for Kinmen people. The reason is just because we believe that the two sides belong to one family. We are one family, so we could do whatever to increase those people's interest and welfare.
Okay, many thanks to my two guests in Beijing, Dr. Zhong Houtao, Research Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and in Taipei, Joanna Lei, a former Taiwan legislator. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. As usual, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.